Hello, and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons & Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. Hello?
Hello.
Just sorry, that came off so well. And I'm so tired.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by myself. My name is Fiona, and with me back from a couple of weeks, like it's been a long time since we've actually done this. So Ryan, hello, welcome back to DM's Book Club.
Thank you very much. Yes, I very selfishly moved house, which took a lot of time and effort and took me away from the microphone for a little while. But I'm back, raring to go with some more D&D for you, which is good. No, I'm well though. We've all moved. It's been a life of boxes. So generally speaking, my D&D books went into a box and came out like 3 weeks later. And by the time I managed to take them out and sort of put them away, my hands were shaking with that sort of withdrawal symptom of like, no, I must consult my DM's book because I've forgotten how greater healing potions work and stuff like that.
What dice is a D12? Is it a D10? No.
I know. The problem I've got is I'm an utter snob as well. If there's something I need to know that is in a book that I own, I feel that crushing weight of responsibility that I must somehow use the physical book at the expense of everything else, even if it's easily Googleable. Mm-hmm. That's my problem, is anything in D&D, you tend to be able to, on the fly, I wonder how much, a closet does. And you're like, okay, well, I'll just Google it. But no, if it's in a book, I must find the book. I don't know what it is, but it's just something like I've invested the time and effort. It looks pretty. Someone wrote the thing.
There's something that Frank Skinner once said is that, if he knows something, he refuses to Google it because he knows it. And there'll be moments in a conversation he goes, I know this thing. And then like 20 minutes later, he'll shout it out loud at the person he's talking to. So that's what I like to think happens with you. You just go, wait a minute, 45 gold. Phew, done it.
Exactly. Especially because I write all over my book. So I know it because it's there. I know. Every time I say that.
I also have this image of you, like almost like Indiana Jones style, opening your box and the gold coming out, like
yes,
the Art of the Covenant.
Oh man, could you imagine putting LEDs or something small down the spine of your book on the inside to like light you up, just on every single page?
I would assume that you would get migraines, Ryan.
That would be absolutely terrible.
What are we talking about today, Ryan? What is our topic of choice?
We play a lot of D&D, and a lot of other people play a lot of D&D. And one of the biggest decisions when you play it is, what are you playing? A lot of people choose to play written modules like Curse of Strahd, or, there's a list there, and I'm thinking, I can't think of any other one. Tomb of the Mad Mage.
Close.
No.
That's
Close?
2 into 1. That's 2 into 1.
What am I thinking of? I had Tomb in my head. Tomb of Annihilation.
There you go.
That's it. Here you go. I'm refusing to Google it. I know it, so I'm going to shout it out randomly like midway through a sentence. A lot of people play pre-bought material that the DM can have a look at and read through and build a world from it. And from that comes not only the quests and the lore and whatever adventure the party are going to go on, but whatever support network they do or don't have. When you take the reins yourself as a DM, you have a little bit of a choice and freedom as to the adventure you wish to produce. Are you going to have an independent tale of strife where your characters go and take a small precious object thousands of miles and drop it into a volcano? No, that one's done. Or are they going to go to a school where they learn all of this sort of magic they need to take on some evil? No, that's done as well. But your choice, effectively, in the adventure that you take. And one way you can do it, and this is something that has kind of been mentioned in the DM's book before, but Tasha, she expands on it a lot, is Chapter 2, Group Patrons, the chapter that take you through what an adventuring group can benefit by working under an organization or patron of significant power.
I was very curious when you picked this one, because I had read it through a couple of weeks back thinking this is quite cool, because I've, like yourself, Ryan, most of the campaigns we've run or we've done one-shots of, either the players don't know each other or they just happen to be in the right place at the right time in a tavern and a notice goes up saying adventurers wanted, etc., because we think that's the easiest way that people would get together. So it's quite nice to have a way to have the party already know each other and have a way that is not necessarily alcohol or even mercenary related. Like you're not setting that precedent saying like, hey, you've all been drinking, let's go kill some goblins. It's like, there's an actual sort of a grander purpose for it. That's what it says in Tasha's, which I was like, oh, that's actually quite cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So what kinds of patron are we talking about today?
Well, we've got all sorts of reasons and all sorts of groups that could be in charge of the adventurers, and they range from being huge organizations with financial power and reputation to lone, powerful individuals who might have established a wedge of power in some corner of your D&D world. There's actually 9 different things in the book, or 9 different examples it gives you, of which the 9th will come on to last. But we're going to be taking a look at a few of them today. We're going to be taking a look at academies, criminal syndicates, guilds, and being your own patron, because I think there's a good range there as to sort of the different types of establishment, good and bad, neutral and aggressive, and then that brilliant, what do you want to do?
Those first 3 cover quite a wide range of areas, and I definitely have thoughts on the academy one. Spoiler, I work in higher education, and some of it rings true, and a lot of it does not. So I'll be interested to see your thoughts on it.
It's whenever I find it talks about this is an organization where everybody can help constructively with each other to push each other positively, and you're thinking, I don't know any organization in the world that is like this at all. This is the biggest piece of fantasy in D&D. Ignore the dragons, ignore the giants. This is total rubbish.
Yeah, peak high fantasy is when people are working together to gain knowledge. It's like
yeah. Oh man, there was somebody who'd done a little cartoon about that. Again, picking up the Lord of the Rings as the analogy, where they're all sat in Rivendell around the council going, we must take the ring to Mordor. And they'd obviously replaced things with, the people around there with modern day equivalents where they're saying, oh yeah, but I've got holiday leave and I need to go and take that. And someone's like, oh yeah, I've got a cousin. I can take us in that direction. Oh yeah, but I could write a book if I stole it. So they go and steal it or something. And it's just
amazing.
like, yeah, modern day. Why don't we go through the sort of overview of them a little bit first? Because I think there are some overarching themes here that once you get your head around them, you realize that actually a lot of what group patrons are about, you may be putting into your campaigns anyway, how they work, what they provide to the party. That session 0 link is a really good place to start, actually, because when you get a group of new players, experienced players around the table for that first session, even not in a campaign generally, even if it's just a one shot or a new arc of a particular story, finding that binding reason why they are adventuring or doing something is really, really tricky. There's a reason why online, all of these lists of 101 reasons why your party have got together and are adventuring is such a popular thing, because it's a trope. They all meet in a tavern and something happens. I've used it before. I will use it again because it's a very good way of linking it together. And when you get distinct PC personalities around a table, it can be very difficult to find an overarching theme as to why they might be somewhere. You've got the edgelord, you've got the widowed assassin, you've got the trope comedy character. How are they all going to be in the same place doing the same thing at the same time? It's quite tricky. And patrons act as a really good way of doing that, because if your party are all connected to a higher organization, they could have just been recruited or pushed into a situation in order to essentially perform an act or a service in the name of that patron. So that's a really good way of doing it. But the support network it provides as well, it can actually leverage or give background to an entire campaign in terms of both story, but in terms of how you as DM want to run it. The idea of a patron is that there are perks and assistances to actually being a member of whatever guild or academy that you are actually in. There's got to be a benefit for the party. You don't just become part of this group, well, unless maybe it's a criminal syndicate, for instance, but you have chosen to be part of this group and you receive a benefit from it. Is it because the guild has a reputational bonus? Is it because they have resources available to them that span across the entire continent? Are they in possession of knowledge, or are they responsible for dealing with a safety of something much greater than your player, which actually forms the backbone to your campaign? They're a really good way of sort of putting, I like to think of the spine of the campaign, no matter which branch your party take or whichever NPCs inevitably they befriend, be it Billy the deckhand, who you designed to be a disposable character in series 1 and they end up taking it through the entire character, or Jimmy the kobold, who again was a comedy death that they picked up and now have in a backpack on your character's sort of arm. Doesn't matter what they end up doing. The guild or the Patron group can effectively act as that spine that keeps things together throughout the entire story.
When you have characters who are so vastly different, it's like, well, why would these people stay together after the first quest or first thing? And the idea that it is admin that keeps them together feels so real, unbelievable, that you have to work with these people day in, day out. And whether or not you get to be friends or not, or acquaintances, I think it just adds that different dynamic. Like there's always this rule in improv whereby the scene or the session is better if you know each other, but you don't need to know each other in a positive way. You could have, the rivals within the group, the ones that butt heads over, like, oh, well, the paladin says we should do this, but the rogue says this, and the wizard says this, and coming to that group consensus, it just reflects real life. And I think it is quite nice to have that sort of like, I guess that's sort of taking that from real life and then putting it back. And I've always said this when I've talked about D&D at work, is that actually role-playing these sort of things is really good for team building, because then you get to see other points of view and then blast them with Eldritch Blast, which you can't do in the real meeting, but it's a way to work things out.
And then someone put it really well a little while ago, where they were saying D&D kind of replicates real life in some ways, but the big advantage it has over real life is that all problems can be solved, which is a really nice thing, especially when it comes to building a group together and building a story and being very positive as a force in your life, is that it doesn't matter what's going on in your campaign. Generally speaking, if you put your mind to it, you can do something about things. And real life is an absolute, well, as we know from the last sort of 12 months and everybody's been going through, some things you just can't do anything about. You have to ride out, and you have to, life is quite a sort of chastening experience a lot of the time. And D&D can have those dramatic and difficult things to deal with, and it can be used as a sounding point to actually make you think, oh, wow, actually there's a lot there to think about, and I'll take that away into my life. But everything can be dealt with. And sorry, that's just a total, this is my love of D&D that we're talking about now.
But I agree with you. I think there is something like I've always said this to you, but like our weekly D&D games are certainly a highlight to me, and the fact they're so early in the week gives me something to push through Mondays. And I think, oh gosh, this hits me back. There was a news article on the BBC News like 4 or 5 years ago, which talked about the rising loneliness in young people. And it talked about when you're in big cities, it's about people are busy, they've got stuff on, but they don't make time. And they talked about like young mothers, obviously not having that support network, which obviously we've just talked about, or the culture was being pushed forward by like, productivity and alcohol, and because that's the only way you socialize. And for younger people, let's say that 30, 31, but having something that was regular and something where you're working towards it, something collaborative, it's silly, it can be serious, and creating a very unique story that always have those you have to be there moments was actually something I never considered how important that was. And it doesn't have to be obviously role-playing games, it could be board games, video games with other people. Like we've had this ourselves when we played Sea of Thieves or Raft or anything like that, where I was never big into these crafting games, but then I realized it's because I was playing them by myself. And now that we have a bit more time to do it, there's something amazing about D&D, bringing people together, setting them an objective to aim for. But at the same time, if they don't get it, it's not a failure. Whereas obviously in real life, if you fail to get something, there are repercussions. There are repercussions in the game, but it doesn't reflect too far. And I think that it's being able to explore those options in a safe environment. Yeah, I found it so important for that. So I absolutely agree.
It's that sense of being part of something that's greater than yourself as well. I find maybe it's just a personality type thing, but if I am struggling with something, or I am finding myself at a loggerheads with confidence or ability or just sheer will or drive to do something, if you flip the scenario and somebody that I care about, or a friend, or even a player in a game that I'm sort of doing something multiplayer with, if they have the same problem I do, suddenly everything switches on and you're like, oh, that's easy. I will go and help them with that problem. And if it's happening to me, apathy may win the day, and I may live with that problem for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. But if it's someone you care about, there's a purpose greater than you, it's much easier sometimes to funnel that positivity and that drive into pushing through and keeping yourself and weirdly pulling yourself back up. It's that trope that the sort of neutral good characters, you think, oh, well, they're just enablers. They're just trying to be as helpful as possible. And they're just a trope of goodness that is clueless. But actually, people don't realize that especially, and this applies to real life as well, if you're kind and you help people, you find that weirdly it's quite selfish because it pushes you forward in a sort of funny way. Having that greater purpose really pushes you through, like being part of a patron.
Excellent.
Look at that link.
Seamless. Seamless.
Exactly, like a scythe.
Love it.
Oh, right. Dear. Should we dive in?
Let's dive in.
So the first group we're going to talk about here is an academy.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say, as we film this, we've mentioned this before, we kind of, actually, Fee keeps a camera on for me. I'm really lazy. My camera's over in a, it's behind a sticky. I do that thing where I put like a little sticky note over my camera so that, the criminals can't log into my
Mark
webcam.
Zuckerberg can't see what you're up to. Yeah.
Exactly. And steal my Face ID, which is very important, as you all know. So when Academy came up, Fee's face just went, oh no, it's like that sort of realization of being part of something that's now been put into
a small cog in a big machine.
Exactly. But an academy is supposed to be some sort of educational establishment that is pursuing either knowledge or power or some sort of protection of secret that is beyond the wider population. Typically, an academy is built to teach and to enhance its members, either through skill or through arcane knowledge in some way. Typically, they tend to be a little bit secretive in the way that they function, either because they are picky about who they take off the streets and allow to become part of the academy. Think private schools or something with like an entrance exam. Or maybe they're very secretive because they possess power that they deem to be off the limits to the population, either because they are too powerful and important to share it with the population because it's a mechanism of keeping power, or maybe it's because the secret is very dangerous and needs to be kept out of the wider population generally. So there's lots of different types of academies. I'm trying to think of the more sort of generic examples. Hogwarts would be a really good example.
Yeah.
Of somewhere. I've forgotten the names of all of them, but Matt Mercer has a few really good academies in his Critical Role campaign that are all to do with like the Cobalt Soul.
Yeah,
would be a good example. I think they are like more of a spy monk-esque network, but they also keep a lot of books and they're also very closeted, and unless you're part of them, you're not going to get anything out of them. So generally speaking, that's sort of what an academy is. But the one thing that unifies them is they are full of knowledge and power if you are in their good books. So being part of an academy gives you a set of keys to knowledge and materials that is off limits to the rest of the population. That's sort of its biggest perk, really.
There's a line in it which says, in the pursuit of knowledge, no risk is too great, which again is that sort of, it's like a good sort of Hogwarts, do not tickle a sleeping dragon. It's that sort of thing I can imagine under every single insignia. Yeah, it's definitely from what I understand, it feels like a very certain perspective on what an academy looks like, in the sense of it is an old-fashioned institution. It feels very US-centric in the way that obviously you have all these departments and stuff like that, which we'll sort of go on to. And it is very idealistic, which is great. And I think that, like we said before, like obviously high fantasy, you can do whatever you want because things are not happening. But I guess for me, going into D&D, what I've discovered is actually the more fun I have really in it, it's the more true to real life it is, which I know sounds like a real contradiction because you want to get away from it. For me, I know at the back of my head, it's like, well, where's that person that says, oh, you've run over budget, you need to cut. You need to, or I'll get back to you. And then they never get back to you for like 2 weeks. Again, I just wanted that little bit of bureaucracy or the red tape somewhere in there. That's the only thing I was like, oh, I wish that I had that in there, just because then I would feel really immersed.
Oh, yeah. All of these patrons are full of as much bureaucracy as you want to put in. And bureaucracy can be quite entertaining, especially for players who can wield 5th or 6th level spells and, can raise armies of the dead or, level them in a particular one turn round. But if they're dealt with red tape, suddenly they freeze up and they're absolutely useless. I like that sort of ability. But academies generally, right? What are you getting to be part of an academy? There are perks, don't you know? Real perks. Like in most sort of guilds or patron groups, they essentially can pay you to do the work. They have a list of tasks or assignments that they would want to do. Again, a really good plot arc point for a DM if you are unsure what to do with your campaign. Just having your academy give out tasks and jobs that further their influence across the world can be a really, really good thing. Sort of keeping the campaign moving. But compensation, not only being able to pay effectively for the accumulation of resources, like if you pick up an artifact or a book from somewhere, the Academy will go, great, here's some gold. We will give you a bounty for it effectively. But also giving accommodation, giving food, giving resources, places to repair your equipment. All of these things are sort of given to you as part of being part of the Academy effectively. You get documentation, which it does say may not be a good thing, depending on the actual reputation of your Academy, but maybe that set of keys to knowledge within your Academy can be applied to other areas of your campaign that may know the Academy and may give you some sort of reputational in effectively, oh, you're a member of X, Hogwarts School of Magic milkshake making. Great. Well, we'll let you into this, dairy guild. Here you go. Here are the keys. Mind Betty on the way in. That's the sort of thing that you could give. It may not be a good thing. They may think, oh, actually, the Academy is well known as being a pocket of necromantic research, and the Farmers Guild don't like that because all of our guild members have pitchforks and we tend to light torches and come at you in very traditional mob form when you appear. So you have to be careful of that. Research is a big thing as well. Xanathar's guide has all kinds of downtime, things that you can get up to. And we'll be referring back to them a little bit as well. If you've got a week between stories, what does your character get up to? Do they learn something? Do they make something? Well, if they're researching some sort of piece of lore, then you actually have access to not only abundant resources, but you also have colleagues, contacts, librarians. I love the idea of a librarian who goes around finding things for you. That just makes me really happy.
It reminds me of like Giles from Buffy. They had the library in Sunnyvale High School, and Buffy goes out and kills things, and then comes back and Giles was like, "Oh, I found all the. Oh, you've done it." That's how exactly how I imagined librarians to be like.
Absolutely, yeah. Giles would be amazing in a campaign. Buffy, you can't go to homecoming. You need it on
You're not my dad.
Exactly. I want to be a teenage girl. Yes, but you're super strong. I know.
Buffy, be normal. Oh, it's such a
goodness me. Dear. Having resources for training and for sort of quest pieces as well. If your Academy doesn't have something, they probably can get it for you with some way. But training is a big thing as well. Downtime activities. I have a lot of people in campaigns continually coming to me to ask for either changes to their character because they don't like certain bits, or to say, actually, we took a direction in this campaign that when I made the character 2.5 years ago, I wasn't exactly expecting. Can I get this skill or can I change this thing? Then yes, if you're training for skills or for abilities that come with the part and parcel of the Academy, you have advantages and discounts on learning those trained skills. So you want to become proficient in Arcana? Fantastic. Here you go. Here's proficiency. You can do that with this sort of, as I say, you can spend some time with Giles, and for a discounted cost, he will teach you the skill. So there are lots of different things that you can do.
Having a Giles fee.
Exactly.
But just to go back slightly, the different types of Academy, because like you said, obviously when we think of Academy, maybe for you and I instantly think university or, like you said, a magical school stuff. But actually obviously Tasha loves her tables. I will say that. You've got like boarding schools, Arcana Enclave, but at the bottom, if you roll a 6 on the D6, you have Museum of Dreams. And I'm like, why is that not higher up? Magical communication or shared dreamscapes connect a network of wide-ranging specialists. Like, how cool is that? Like, I think the lower down you go on all of these lists, the more they've gone, okay, we've got the atypical obvious ones. We need 2 or 3 more. And people have gone, why not dreams? And they've gone, yes, put that in.
Exactly. We're thought stealers. Is that okay as an Academy? Yeah, sure, great. Well, we'll say nothing more about this point. And you're like, no. Let's circle back to that. That's quite terrifying.
Yeah, but yeah, again, it's just always different. Again, it's okay to have a boarding school, but if you want to have that little bit of flavor in a campaign or something like that, why not dreams? Why not something beyond what I would say, like the neutral being like boarding school or an evil or good? Because obviously you've got like the secret monastery or elite institute, all that sort of thing, and then you've got the vault of secrets. Ooh, like again, I'm thinking like Borderlands and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just nice to see that. Obviously, there are different types, and it's not just, you don't have to go for the obvious one. There are examples of it, but again, they are quite specialized devised. And it's like, if this is cool, if this is true, what else is true? So you'd have to adapt a bit of the world around it to make it worthwhile, I'd say.
Exactly. So once you've got these perks and you're in the academy, there are all kinds of ways that you actually then sort of function through the day-to-day activities, and that gives the academy purpose, because they're giving you all these perks. They probably want something in return. Through all of these Patron groups, you have a contact, something that effectively gives you the orders and acts as your representation between you and the greater powers who are far too busy within the guild to actually then talk to you. The head of the academy, you can't just walk up to Dumbledore's office. You've got to deal with the Snapes and the Flitwicks before you can really, communicate with him. So there are these brilliant ones. I like the idea. Sorry, the top one, the harried functionary, a disinterested secretary conveys written correspondence to you from an exceptionally busy or aloof senior faculty member. I like that. Someone who doesn't care gives you instructions from someone who's too busy to see you. That's the bureaucracy that everybody wants in a D&D campaign. I love it.
I've been in contact with those people. That's what I felt. But I quite like the second one, though, the celebrated instructor. Despite their throngs of ambitious assistants, they consider you their star pupil. I'm instantly getting Lockhart flashes, from Chamber of Secrets, because that sort of thing where he takes interest in you, even though you're like, no, go away. So you can have that almost antagonistic relationship with them, which I would love.
Even you take the phrase celebrity researcher and you really put a Lockhart approach to it and saying celebrity doesn't necessarily mean successful. It just means famous. Maybe he's useless in using you to actually do all of his reputational achievements. And, within 10 sessions, you realize that all of your achievements are being celebrated on his behalf.
Yes.
Or something like that.
The final one I really loved was the wizened feature, which again, again, you might have more experience of this than I do, but I just imagine, Oxford, all these stuffy rooms and stuff. And it's like, what do you want? It's like just an old man like surrounded by books and go away.
Yeah, exactly. It's academics who have an office, but they ignore the office and have claimed a part of a public space. And that is their office now. So even though it's the chemistry lab for second years, you go to it and they have set up like 3 desks. And if you go anywhere near them, they're like, what do you want? No, this is my book. I lent this 5 years ago to someone and they took 2 weeks to get it back to me. So I'm never lending it again, sort of thing. And you think, oh, no. Absolutely. Here we go. So what does the academy want from you? Well, again, they can give you quests. They have what they call an academy factomus. I don't know how I'm pronouncing that, but that's a word I've never seen before. I quite like that. But essentially, what it's trying to get at is that the academy has a purpose, and the quests it gives you effectively push you towards fulfilling that academy's purpose. So let's say your academy is in the business of collecting forbidden history, was one of the options it gives you. You will find yourself in tombs and long lost places quite a lot, looking for artifacts and books that have been lost and need recovering. That's all absolutely fantastic. Let's say that you are, again, I quite liked this one. It was cryptogeography, which sounds like something that could be scientific, but it's just search for proof of the hidden land or that the world isn't structured as commonly assumed. Yes, you can be the person who's trying to prove that Atlantis exists. I love that. It's just as an idea, it's just amazingly fun. But as a DM, your academy has a functional aim. It wants to do something. What is it, and why is it pushing players towards effectively doing quests of a certain type?
Again, it's up to the DM's discretion, but there's no time limit. Where again, obviously in real life there probably would be. I think my only criticism of all these patrons, which I'm sure we'll go into in a little bit, is that apart from, I'd say, the criminal syndicate, there's no reference or thing of what happens if you don't complete these things, other than like, we'll take perks away. And all the perks are really interesting and they give you this food for thought, but there's nothing like necessarily gameplay advantage to it. It is all sort of like role play flavor. Like you said, like the training and the research and sort of all optional really. And that's totally fine. But it's that sort of thing is like, well, what if we don't complete the mission? What if we keep the artifact for ourselves? You'd probably say they get kicked out or something like that. But then that's might be what they want. Whereas I think what would be really fun is that you are just put on with lots of menial tasks, like deadlines and stuff like that, and you're not allowed out until you finish these these little things. So I guess for me, it's just tweaking the way, like, what is the consequence of not fulfilling your duties to the university? Because you'll be off to one mission, and as one is tended to do, you probably get sidetracked by a whole load of things, and then eventually you come back. Probably the academy is like, where the hell have you been for like
you've missed
2 years?
This many lessons, you owe us this many fees for your dues. What are you doing? Yeah, and I like to think as well, Xanathar in the downtime activities, there's a lot of references to rivals as being quite a fun, entertaining thing, where maybe when something negative happens, your rival does it successfully. And that, for whatever reason, gives you a bit of grief. So if you don't do the quest properly, then maybe Snooty Poopy Pants is the one that comes in and very gallantly saves the day, and he gets all the benefits and you don't. And you're like, oh, damn you and your floppy blonde hair. I find you absolutely repulsive. And that's a quest thing in itself.
No, I like that. That's actually probably a really good way to motivate people. Is that, oh, if you don't get it, then some other person does. That's not the hero of this story. I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot.
As you mentioned, academies aren't the only thing. We're going to have a look at criminal syndicates now, which are a little bit different in motivation, because I quite like this one. Unlike an academy, which you probably joined or somebody willingly provided the push to get you into it, a criminal syndicate you may have chosen to join, but it may have chosen you to join because of some debt or some issue that it had with you. Maybe you killed the wrong person. Maybe you bribed the wrong colleague. Maybe you extorted money from the wrong place that was under its control, and now you owe the criminal syndicate big. Maybe you are the chaotic evil character your DM hates, and you need a very functioning way of being railroaded into a sensible campaign, so the criminal syndicate's the clever thing to sort of do with you. Or maybe you just fancy a bit of an anti-hero campaign where you have good people working for bad people to do good things, something like that. Or there can be a real range of reasons why you might work for a criminal syndicate, and there are all kinds of different syndicates that it gives you as examples. Anything from thieves guilds and assassin societies. Really think your sort of Skyrim or high fantasy groups of people who do nothing but steal coin pouches from old women in markets, or decide to kill off random cousins for people trying to crawl up the throne of, well, either a throne or an inheritance list of some kind. But there are other ones as well, like Pirate Fleet. Amazing. We've played too much Sea of Thieves recently to turn that one down as an option. So I like the idea that you are part of some sort of large pirate consortium, and you've got your own ship, and the bureaucracy is mundanely stupid things like, you didn't buy your cannons from us. They're not to regulation. We're really, really pissed off. Or you didn't burn the corpses of the things well enough, and now the pirate lord doesn't feel like you've really flamed the flag for him properly, or whatever it might be. Yeah, there are all kinds of things. The two bottom ones, I didn't know which one would appeal to you more, body snatchers or thought thieves. I mean, I like the alliteration from thought thieves, but...
Yeah, thought thieves. I did think that as well. Just like, ooh, the psychic criminals infiltrate their target's minds to steal secrets and disguise their existence. Like, whoa.
Oh my goodness.
It just feels like a bit 1984, I will say. Like, I'm sure they have that thought police is what they're called. But again, I love the idea of the pirate fleet. They say, no, it's like, we have a code, a pirate's code, and there are more guidelines. However, in this case, we just don't like you. I was just thinking about all those Pirates of the Caribbean films where you have Keira Knightley going, we must do something. They're like, but there'd be a code.
There'd be a code. We all stick to the code.
We all stick to the code when it suits us.
Exactly. And then when the plot determines that we need to forget or pick up the code again. So what do you get from being part of a criminal syndicate then? So it is full of perks that are all designed to enable criminal enterprise. As long as you don't drag the guild publicly through the mud, which tends to be the things that it dislikes, or get there's certain safe houses and sort of benefits that it provides that you can accidentally spill to the wider public, and it may not like you doing that and may take those perks away from you in the future. But essentially, a criminal syndicate wants to enable you to thrive as a person, and instead of paying you directly, it takes a cut of the money that you earn. So it's really your responsibility to earn the money, to steal the thing, to coin the gold. And it will then effectively assist you in giving you the tools, equipment, or even the excuses you need to do your job and then hide from the job and repercussions from the job afterwards. It also has some very useful things to do with attaining and then selling contraband in the style of what they call fences. So not only can you purchase things that may be illegal or difficult to obtain through your guild, which has a lot of connections, but you can also then sell it in the other direction. Say you did steal the crown from the Queen's head. How are you going to sell it? Well, the fence at your criminal syndicate may actually be a really good person to do that, especially for a cut.
And there's no mishaps, which could happen if you were doing it, which I like that idea that you are a good criminal, but not good enough to make sure nothing happens. But I think one thing I do like about the criminal syndicate is this idea, because like we were saying before, with the academy, you're paid a certain amount, whereas here it's like, it does feel like, well, you know, here is your gold that you got from this job, but we've taken 15% of that. It does feel like, oh, they're really organized. They must be, like, certainly because it gives the example of like, it passes on 85% of the fee to the party. And it sort of mentions like, oh, you know, usually about 15%, but you can go higher or lower. And I was like, damn, all our contracts at my university that we have, they take a lot more. So I'm wondering, it's like, damn, either this syndicate must be really, really successful in your own campaigns, or I'm actually working for a crime syndicate in real life. I can't tell which is which.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the places we work for may secretly be crime syndicates. You just never know, would you?
It'd make my life more interesting, yeah.
I know, in that sort of crazy world. But yeah, and again, the contact at a crime syndicate can be anywhere from being really good to really bad. Again, you're not really going to have direct access to the people at the top of a crime syndicate because their secrecy probably is quite important to them, be it because they don't want somebody to find them and usurp them, but also law enforcement is the constant bane of any criminal syndicate. So be it trying to avoid the guards or bribe them in sort of turn effectively, that's going to be its main job. And your contact effectively acts as a middle person between you and the hierarchy at the top. Again, there are some fantastic ideas for this to do with people who have been bribed and have been converted, or maybe even people that have betrayed the criminal organization but haven't been found out yet, or there's no clout to actually bring up their existence to the sort of people. I like the idea of criminal royalty as well.
Yeah.
Like some sort of person of the royal palace who is in some way connected to the criminal guild, and nobody's entirely sure why or how.
Again, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but in the little town of Saltbush, obviously, there's a council, and one of the members on the council, a couple of members on the council are evil dealings and stuff like that. One is a merchant, and one is like an assassin who is a thing. And it's interesting to see their connections. Like on the outside, they have this persona, but actually all that drives them is money, greed, and like power. So that's what it reminded me of here. But in terms of like Syndicate here, it feels like, oh, if you want to have that anti-hero campaign or a little bit more sort of like a bit darker sort of thing. I think the other thing they did suggest was that what if it's the opposite way around? You actually are working for good, you're just doing it by nefarious means. Like the means isn't justifying the end per se. So for me, I was thinking like, you know, Robin Hood or any of those things where you're giving money back, you're robbing the rich to feed the poor, that sort of thing, which it mentions at some point as well, which I thought was quite good.
Exactly. The idea of a criminal syndicate is it's against the law enforcement of that area. But if the law enforcement are bad or evil, like even I'm thinking, so perhaps you are a resistance group who are fighting against tyrannical rule, or maybe even there is a group of people who are against Strahd, for instance, in Ravenloft. That would be, you know, a criminal syndicate of some kind as well. So there's all kinds of different bits, and that's for you as a DM to sort of play and tweak with. But I like this one. There's a lot of scope for plot-based activity, and especially quests that maybe would be a little bit more edgy and anti-hero-esque than other patron groups might sort of give you.
Yeah, it gives that choice to the players, even though I do like the idea that, you know, something's happened and they have to do something in order to repay their debt. But that sort of feeling that actually once you're in, you're never really out. And just having that connection and stuff like that. And yeah, I love this idea, like with all of them, like this contact who's like a shady figure in themselves. The one that got me was the clever urchin, which again makes me feel of Sherlock Holmes, like the Underground Network or the Irregulars. You're like, oh, God blimey, governor, you've been told you've not been paying your fees. Oh, that's not very nice.
Exactly. I like the idea of a clever urchin being the one to give you quests involving assassination. Oh, you haven't got a spare silver for a pie? And by the way, can you kill the pie merchant? It's,
Yeah.
You won't mind.
It would be a great favour to Don. Okay. Goodbye. I'm just a cheeky chappy. Yeah, a proper Artful Dodger-esque.
Exactly. So criminal syndicates represent nefarious groups or people against the authorities. The other swing on that is groups that are working with the benefit of the authorities or necessarily are supposedly good groups, although we know from lots of campaigns that necessarily that's not true.
Nope.
But we now have guilds. Now, guilds can be anything representing a trade, business, or skill within a city. So you think traditionally of blacksmiths or jewelers, for instance, but you could have anything from fishermen to the fantastic one within the group. I think it was the original Saltmarsh book in 3.5. I think it was the second DM's guide or something. I can't remember what it was, but it had Saltmarsh as this big place. And there was a dung sweepers guild,
cool.
which I thought was the best idea ever. Literally, they're just the street cleaners have formed their own guild. And their only trade is keeping the streets clean and then underhand selling all of the stuff they find in the bins that people have accidentally thrown out.
Amazing.
I quite like that one. But a guild can be anything that, big, really important things. As I say, blacksmithing would be a good example of a trade that has a lot of money and reputation through it. And then less important things like lamp lighting, for instance, would be something that would be not necessarily big, but might be reputational enough to hide some other truer sort of guild or consortium effectively. But anything that involves gold or business, trading money, trading objects, trading skills, that you will find in a guild. And the quests kind of represent that a little bit with guilds as well. They're all to do with the accumulation of money, the furthering of the trade, or sort of acquiring the materials to trade whatever business that guild does, or even just to actually collect debts and avoid rival businesses. So there's a lot of crossover between a guild and a criminal syndicate sometimes in the quests it can give, where maybe there are two merchants guilds in a city and one is trying to underplay the other one and disrepute it and destroy it from inside. And you find yourself doing much more evil quests than you might have imagined working for a reputable business effectively. So there's all kinds of things you might be doing as part of the guild, obtaining artifacts, furthering materials, trading, or, disposing of business rivals if you were sort of doing that underhand.
There's one right at the end, which, on the quest ones, you've got obviously the masterpiece, a piece of artwork, being able to sort of you've created it either by the guild or acquired it through agents, and it's now gone missing. Getting that back, retrieving that. As collectors, so not necessarily in part of the guild, you have a client, mysteriously, who wants to buy stuff, which, like you said, it can feel like it's, the sort of the flip side of the crime syndicate, whereas, you'd steal it and sell it on. This is acquiring it through different means. Then the final one is the bill has come due. Your guildmaster has achieved a vaunted position by means of an otherworldly bargain, and now the bill has come due, and you have to do something about it. I was like, that feels way out of my pay grade.
Yep, exactly. You're third level characters, and the genie owns someone's soul now. So can you go get it for me? Thank you. That would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, totally. But there are perks of being in such a reputable establishment. You get accommodation and actually training and resources being the small thing. I think, anywhere that has an assortment of experts within it can be teaching you things and providing you resources for trade. But there's one thing tucked away in equipment, whereas you can use the guild's specialized tools, laboratories, libraries, and other crafting space and equipment within the guild hall. And if you are using it, then you can double your proficiency roll in anything that is using that skill. Artificers, wizards, anybody creating objects or equipment may find a guild incredibly useful. So you want to make a staff. Well, actually, you can do it very cheaply and you can do it with double proficiency. So that works really well. I think artificers just are fantastic for guilds generally. Artificers are one of those classes where you can build and do a lot of things behind the scenes anyway. And this sort of helps that.
Yeah, and from what I remember when we did our Artificer episode, there's or certainly when I did Nyx, is that there's a whole thing of talking about rivals and stuff. So that fits so well into this, having rivals, having that sort of motivation to one up the other person, which makes sense. And the other thing that stood out for me in terms of perks is that you pay just an annual fee of 15 gold, and that's it. There's no other necessarily like, if you're part of the guild, you represent us, but equally it's easy. You're like, I don't pay my fee anymore. It's like, great, you're no longer part of the guild. It feels straightforward than maybe the other two, where there'll be a little bit more consequences to if you had to leave for whatever reason. I appreciate, like, I'm sort of like going, these are good, but what if you want to leave? It's like not helpful, perhaps. It's just interesting about the consequences, I guess.
There is no leaving a guild. That's just absolutely not something you can do at all. But guilds can be as well. I like to think of sort of explorers guild being an idea as well. You don't really have a trade other than stories and finding new places, but cartographers and explorers can find a place there as as people who create or sell things. So there's space for any type of character with any type of skills. This isn't just a charisma thing. This is anything from intelligence to strength to dex. Like any skill that you've got, there is a place for it in the guild.
And just looking at the context as well. So again, you've got the attentive overseer, that there is someone who takes a personal interest in what your group's up to. So I feel like that's the sort of the HR, maybe health and safety person that comes along every so often to see, like, make sure everything's above board and stuff. But then as you go further down the list, you have the golem guide. Your guild contact is the soul of a long dead artisan preserved in a construct body. Where did that come from in the idea generation meeting? It was like, what about this? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And then you've got like the fallen muse, which is like a fallen celestial. Why are they here? Somehow they hope that what you do will help them with their ascension, essentially. And it's like, again, these are really cool, but also very, very specific. And again, for me, it would be like, how would you work that into a one-shot or even a campaign? Because these are great story hooks, but like, do they affect the rest of the bigger story? Because they seem very sort of important or different, unless it was a really common thing that you would just have loads of celestials falling from the sky anyway, or it's something in the lore where any important artisan, it was mind flayers, that was it, where they take the brains or they take the essence and they put them into those brain jars, and you have all that information. So that unless it's a part of the culture, I wonder. It's just, like, I love the ideas, but I'm like, how do we put this in?
You can have as many good ideas as you want, but without a sort of overarching theme, it's difficult. But that's one of the joys of being a patron and sort of being part of one, is that you've got this spine for your story that everything can sort of attach to and can hold the whole thing up.
What if, Ryan, I don't want to do any of these things? I'm like, I want to branch out on my own. What would you say for that?
Well, right at the end, page 103, there is a little example of being your own patron, which is a really, really cool idea, actually. Generally speaking, we're not going to go into the detail of this too much, because I think this warrants a session in itself on just running a business in D&D and making your character be its own sort of reputational thing. But the idea is that you can be your own patron if you've got the money, resources, or power in order to pull that off effectively. Let's say you've been running a regular campaign and your characters are of a decent level now and decently sort of established within a community. Maybe the story has meant that they are now well known. The deeds they have done have effectively pushed them towards reputational sort of might, or because they've got money and resources now. They can set up as their own group. They can do their own thing. Maybe your paladin has decided to set up their own religious order, or your rogue wants to set up their own criminal syndicate, or even you just have become so well known with the sovereign in the area that you set up your own questing guild. These are all options that you've got, as long as you've got the money and the time to sort of put into it. And again, we'll go into the mechanics of this another time. But the idea here is that for a DM, this provides a really, really good way of doing a story where you don't necessarily have to be doing something on a really short chronological space of time. You can do things over a much longer period of time. A campaign that genuinely lasts years, where between sessions, maybe there's 4 weeks, your characters are filling downtime, and then something will happen after 4 weeks. It's a really good way of running a story like that. You've got an organization to run. Most of your character's time is actually spent in the running of that organization, but then suddenly we get together to play D&D and, someone didn't pay their dues, go and collect it. Or, there's been a disaster in Warehouse 3, go and sort it out. It's a really good way of sort of thinking about things. And the idea of being your own patron is that you give your PCs and your players the opportunity to actually dictate what they do. What story do they want to play? Who do they want to be? It's a really, really good way of sort of giving the keys to them and saying, well, go for it. You tell me what we're playing, and then I will deal with the background stuff behind it.
The story is now in the player's hands, which is, I think for maybe a more experienced DM to be able to let control of that sort of stories go down, like you said, work on the background stuff. I think that's really good. There are examples of this already in D&D. So Acquisition Incorporated, which is built solely around like, here is a business franchise, and the main characters go out, and whilst it started out as a venturing party, they're really now more interested in the money side of it. And obviously they have the whole source book on that and how to run the guild and stuff. But even, again, we're not going to go into too much detail, but I think it's Dragon Heist Waterdeep, there is a tavern, like a disused tavern called Troll Skull Manor. There we go. There we go. Got my teeth in. Which is like a 5-floor like manor house, but also tavern that's run down. And during the adventure, your players have the option to actually pick it up and work it and get like regular funds, because again, that whole adventure is that you don't necessarily get a lot of funds until right at the end when you do the heist. And so being able to have like a little stream of income, but also then if you do have that, you get all the problems with running a tavern and stuff like that. So it is a way to do it. I think I would be careful in the sense, like, I play D&D in the sense of, why this person at this moment in this time? What makes this person at this moment different to every single other day? And I worry that maybe this sort of like creating your own patron or whatever, that you could get into the point it becomes a business simulator. It's that sort of like casual gaming you do on your phone where it just comes like, we do this, we do this. But maybe that's just me. I think as long as you're willing to be like, okay, we're going to have some downtime. This session's going to focus on this particular one. Maybe you're having like, I think I've talked about it before, but the West March sort of campaign style where you have a big guild or a big company of such, and then you have players who don't always play together, but enough players, and you run the sort of ongoing things like that, but then they go out and do one thing, come back, another team goes out, comes back. So you can always have a changing players, but the overall campaign is more about how do we run this, what big things happened, because one team might do something that affects all the other teams. Yeah, I can see it like that. I think for me, I just wouldn't want to necessarily go, you've got a business to run now, because then it's like, oh god, taxes. No, I want to go out and fight. I want to do the good thing. So I think that was the only thing for me from that point of view.
Yeah, it's a different style of campaign, definitely, and it adds a longer term, grander plan to everything. But as you say, it is a good way of getting other players involved if you need a rotating PC ensemble, or maybe you want a one-shot-esque system where you have a campaign built of separate encounters that you can chop in and out of. This is a really good way of doing it. And the benefit of being your own patron is maybe you have one player character, one PC who is the actual leader, but then some of your other characters are not the leader. So you can chop and change between what you're doing. I think it's quite a nice way of doing it. It's a very different campaign. And I think, as I say, we'll have an episode where we go into running a business generally, because I think it, especially with the Acquisitions Incorporated take on it, as well as the DM stuff, it can be really exciting. But something to think about.
There's an RPG called Monster of the Week, where essentially it's like Buffy or Angel, that you have the same group of people that fight a monster or something like that. And what's really cool about it is that you can create the world from that. This is the same sort of setting, but the players create it. And maybe with this, if you're having, it is about the guild, it's writing the story about the guild and interesting points in its timeline, which you then could probably put into another campaign. 100 years ago, all these weird things happened as a part of this company, which affected the landscape. If you were going to try and write, I don't know, your own story or your own sort of like campaign module, actually playing with players to create these different establishments and put them somewhere as if you're writing your own module, or if you're writing a book, perhaps, So yeah, it's a different way of running a game, which I think as long as your players agree to it and are like, I have an invested interest in it, I think it's just making sure they are okay on that, because it is quite different compared to the other patrons. And I think the only other thing I'd say as well is that sounds like to me it's a group patron. So it's like one patron for the whole group. And presumably you'd have that at the beginning of the campaign and as a way to start things off. But at the same time, you could have it in the middle of the campaign. I was wondering whether or not, could you have more than two patrons and it's about individuals. And would that create a lot of work perhaps? Because obviously as a DM, you've got to think about these two, what is the sort of relationship or status between these two people and then the greater sort of guilds or whatever between them. Would that be something that you would do? Like, would you only have, say, like, you can only be part of one guild at a time for all of your members? Or would you say, oh, you could have two or more in a group?
Absolutely, you could be part of two or more. I think from a DM's point of view, there is a little bit more to think about. Although there is a thing where you can only do so much in one session. So you don't necessarily have to double prepare every session in the sense that each guild wants you to do something every week that you get together with your players. It can alternate between, and it could be quite a fun way of balancing that. And even if it was just different contacts within the same group, it would be a good way of introducing some flavor. You could even have competition and rivalry there. Yeah. So perhaps after 20 sessions, you've got the criminal guild and the actual guild give you the same quest, but in different ways. And suddenly you have to choose between, well, how do I solve this in a way that means that neither guild is going to want my scalp or suspect that I may be playing like across the playing field here. It could be really interesting. I think there is a lot more to think about, but that's not necessarily something to shy away from.
No, I just, again, it's that sort of thing. I was like, how much work do I need to do as a DM to include these sort of things? And like you said, I do feel like patrons are campaigns specific. So if you know your campaign is definitely more open world compared to, say, maybe a written module, you can have it in there. It's just, again, justifying why it's there rather than having it there and stand out. I guess just for me as a storyteller, just being able to, maybe I just like smooth edges over my worlds. I don't like sharp points.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for all these things. And I've definitely learned a lot about, how people in the US see what kind of organizations we as players would be interested in. But yeah, it's all good food for thought. What are you up to? Anything to plug? Anything going on in the Civ 6 world?
There's always stuff going on. No, you can come and find me on YouTube. I'm Ursa Ryan. Come and say hello. I've got the Ursa Ryan Discord as well. So you can come and talk to me about D&D if you would like. But no, things are pretty good at the moment. I cannot complain. How are you doing? What are you up to?
Thank you. I'm very well. My name is Fiona. I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very well. I am behind on my editing, as always, but it's been really good. I've had some really good feedback about a couple of the episodes that got out. We've had Below, which was a very intense solo RPG, which I got some really good feedback on. And, of course, Ryan, I know you know about this, but it's the first time I can announce on this podcast, but we actually have a discount code for an actual friendly local game store, which is really exciting.
That's true. Yeah, fantastic.
So there is a game store called Third Space Gaming. Oh God, I'm going to get the name wrong. That's really embarrassing. Third Space Gaming. Anyway, they are they own Burnley, so near my hometown, and Burnley. And basically, if you use the offer code DMBC at checkout, you get 10% off your first order on any of the RPG products or any products in anything. So if you're into your minis, if you want to get the new D&D book, obviously Van Richen's Guide to Monsters or whatever it's called, that's coming out, do it there. And it's quite nice to see that people have started using it. So yep, if you want to use it, it's the DMBC at checkout for 10% off.
There you go. Look, we've grown up. We're all official now.
I hate it. It's like being an adult. Ugh. Well, until next time, friends, thanks for listening, and we will speak to you, hear from you. We'll do something with you next time.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.